Point of No Return by Wildheart. Chapter 7, 7th Revelation. Having decided that Twilight would most likely be staying with Her Majesty, Verity took her leave. She briefly considered telling Queen Nyx about the return of Rainbow Dash and the presence of Applejack, but she kicked herself over it, even after all that had happened, and how disappointed she was in the farm mayor for being so close-minded. She would never betray her friends like that, and she still counted Applejack as a friend, despite her indiscretions. As she walked along the inner walls to the exit, flanked by 2 guards, she considered those faults. The most obvious one was the rebellion, but that was not foremost in her mind. No, that was involving a misunderstanding, one that changed their lives forever. The catalyst that had ended their friendships 5 years ago.
Cassie is going to get hurt if this keeps up!
Pinkie wondered softly. Her eyes widened as she watched the race unfolding high above Ponyville. Rarity gave a worried look to the Earth Pony. She hadn't been the same since Twilight died, but she had been holding up with the help of her friends. She was recovering, albeit slowly.
She'll be all right, Sugar Cube. Dance can take a little jostling. It'll be good for her to get this aggression out of her system.
Applejack gave a peaceful smile up to the sky. If she was worried about her harvest this year, she didn't show it. Verity supposed she was just letting what would come. Watching her mare-friend race likely helped. The white unicorn turned her eyes skyward, to the streaks of light running through the sky. One rainbow, one flame. Rainbow Dash had, in her normal way of thinking, had called Spitfire a traitor for signing up with Queen Nyx, and obviously, in her normal way of thinking, the only way to settle this was a race. Verity could see why the Wonderbolt's leader had done so. She must have been worried her friends would go half-cocked and join the rebellion, or worse. So, she joined with Nyx and told them to follow. They had listened to their longtime wingmate. For their quick decision to swear fealty, they had been allowed to keep their status and rank in the equestrian military. The EUP really keeps its staff up, doesn't it? And not much had changed, aside from Her Majesty's good graces. That had been fine for a while. Her Pegasus friend had assumed it was some sort of undercover assassination mission, or some sort of rot. When nothing of the sort occurred, Dash had confronted Spitfire, who told her plainly that she wasn't planning on betraying her new sovereign anytime soon. That she honestly wasn't that bad. That had come to challenge, and here they were. The Wonderbolts were here too. Well, the Shadowbolts, as they now called themselves. Every pony was enjoying this show, not a one taking it seriously. After all, Dash was known for being a hot-headed foal. Surely she would calm down after this. They would race, perhaps get into a tussle, and come back friends again.
You sure about that?
The Shadowbolt named Sharpwing said, grinning.
Dash doesn't seem like the type to like losing. Might even make her more mad.
Applejack scoffed at that, rolled her eyes, though she was grinning herself.
My Dash ain't gonna be the one losing this here race. I just hope Spitfire can take it gracefully.
As 2 of them continued this banter, Pinkie simply stared upwards. She seemed terrified. Verity frowned and sat next to her friend. She laid a leg around her back, but the Earth Pony didn't respond.
Pinkie dear, everything is going to be all right. It's just a race.
Only then did the formerly fire-loving pony look over her friend. Fashionista recoiled a bit in shock at how haunted Pinkie looked. She had that look of some pony who knew something terrible was about to happen, but was hoping against hope it wouldn't.
Pinkie, please, don't tell me your Pinkie sense.
Pickamina simply burst into tears, and that made everyone look over with confusion to the pair of ponies. Rarity looked at them, eyes wide, and barely mumbled,
Stop the race.
What? Rarity? What'd you say?
Her friend startled as Rarity suddenly jumped up and screamed,
Stop the race! Oh, my sun, moon, and stars, she can't hear! Can't see!
The unicorn now panicked and cast her eyes to Fluttershy, who scooted back a bit.
Fluttershy! You have to stop Dash! But, she said we shouldn't interfere.
Applejack rolled her eyes, and what she believed to be more Rarity's overreactions. It turned her back to the race in progress. Rarity shook her head violently and continued,
That doesn't matter. You simply must.
A gasp from Applejack made her whip around. Pinkie watched in absolute horror as Rainbow Dash went spiraling down into the trees below. The farm mare sprinted off to where she landed. Her friends and Shadowbolts weren't far behind. The unicorn thanked the guards, smiling, and walked across the courtyard palace. This was open to the public, but heavily guarded. The guard postings looked a bit thin today. Suppose he was out searching for the two most dangerous ponies in Equestria. Rarity climbed onto a bench and examined the flower closely. She wasn't truly interested in the blossom to any degree, but it was better than thinking of what she had been thinking of. She didn't want to think of such sad things anymore. Pinkie was all right again, and Rarity was so sure she could convince Applejack to give up this full crusade. She understood Applejack's loss, but this was going too far. What had happened was surely not Her Majesty's fault after all. Thias! Thias! Come on, girl, speak to me.
Don't you leave me like Thias.
Applejack's plaintive sobbing was the first thing they heard. Pinkie stopped short, falling behind the others as they left Applejack's side. The all-reserve pony was cradling the cyan Pegasus in one of her forelegs, the other holding up Dash's head. Fluttershy trembled as she stepped forward and examined her best friend. Applejack watched the pale yellow Pegasus, her eyes filled with the same terrified hopelessness that Pinkie earlier had. Spitfire looked like she was about to throw up, her comrades surrounding her, asking what happened. Fluttershy bent her neck down over her oldest friend and started to cry. Applejack's chin fell, her face hid behind her father's hat. A few tears dripped down over her muzzle and falling onto the dead form of Rainbow Dash, before she gently laid the mare down. You killed her. Spitfire shuddered at those words and shook her head quickly.
It was an accident. I just hit her a little too hard. I didn't mean to kill her.
Applejack stood up, her body trembling with rage. Again, see, Spitfire, part of an evil or part of the Shadowbolts, does something horrifying. Told ya, night never ended. Night past in style. She didn't bother stopping the tears either. So much emotion was running through her, she couldn't think straight, or keep herself from jumping at Spitfire. Her friends were waiting for that, though, as the farm mare was practically oozing violent intent.
Let it go! Say kill her! That knight killed my darling!
Fluttershy and Rarity stared, stunned by the sudden outburst and utter fury that the Earth Pony displayed. Pinkie slowly slunk away, head low to the ground. No one noticed her leave.
Hey! Help me out here!
The Shadowbolt, named Honeydew, struggled to keep Applejack from getting to Spitfire, who could only stare, as he had been frozen in place. The other four present Wonderbolts grabbed the farm mare and dragged her, kicking and screaming, to the ground. Rarity took off her shock, rushed to her side, and did the only thing she could think of to help. She slapped Applejack as hard as she could. Rarity was never much for combat, but she was one of the elements of harmony, and knew how to handle herself in a fight if she really needed to. She just didn't have much stamina, so when she slapped Applejack with as much force she could muster for the moment, the only reason there wasn't a crunch of shattered, crushed cheekbone was the fact that the one she was slapping could take much more abuse than that. Instead, slap did its job. Applejack's son stopped kicking and screaming and went still. The ponies holding her down continued to do so for a few minutes, making sure she wouldn't try anything. It was only after Rarity nodded to them that they let go, quickly stepping into the defensive formation around Spitfire. The aforementioned couldn't tear her eyes off of Rainbow Dash's fallen body. They hadn't been friends for long, but it had been long enough to make this the easily most traumatic thing she ever experienced. She never lost a friend by causing their death before, after all. Applejack sat up, cast one more glare to Spitfire, and then she walked very slowly to her fallen lover's side, slid under the ass, probably the Pegasus onto her back, without another word or a look to any of the others. Shadow bolts quickly escorted their leader off. Flame-maned Pegasus looking back to Rarity and Fluttershy, speaking one last time. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. The funeral had been rather gloomy. They already lost one dear friend, and this deepened those wounds that had barely had time to heal. For some of them, they hadn't yet in the first place. Pinkie didn't attend the funeral. That was when she started cooping herself up entirely. Applejack got over her anger, realizing Spitfire couldn't have possibly wanted to kill Dash. It was an accident. She had no motive anyway. Rainbow Dash was the Shadow Bolt's friend too, after all. But that anger was just replaced with more grief. Spitfire was there to see off the Rainbow-Maiden Pegasus, and she and Applejack had talked at great length. Forgiveness was given, but the farmer mare wasn't sure Spitfire was ready to forgive herself. It was after that Spike came running up with some very disturbing news. News that revived the fury inside Applejack. That day, Applejack demanded Pinkie, Rarity, and Fluttershy join her. She was going to join a rebellion against Queen Nyx. Rarity and Fluttershy tried to talk her down, though they had their doubts as well. They tried to calm her friend that she could calm down. Think about this before she acted, but she would have none of it. She denounced them all, calling them traitors and cowards. As she left, took nothing with her but her hat. Rarity still remembered quite freshly what Spike had said to cause that. It was horrifying in itself. Definitive evidence of foul play. Spitfire had looked so devastated, so sorrowful. Rarity didn't quite buy it, but it was still condemning. Spitfire had been, directly after Dash's funeral, promoted from being a mere leader of a stunt flying team that was only technically military. She had been promoted to a personal lieutenant for Queen Nyx herself. These days, Spitfire was as busy as she always had been. She always took the time to visit Rainbow Dash's grave, however, at least once a week. Rarity wasn't sure Applejack would like that. How would the farm mare react to the current state of things in Ponyville, if the White Unicorn were to convince her to give up? Surely she could see things were just fine. The fascination wasn't stupid, though. She knew there was just more to it than just a personal vendetta against Queen Nyx or her underlings. Applejack wasn't such a foolish pony as to cause as much trouble for Her Majesty's reign as she had over that. And that itself was another problem. One Rarity had not considered, and it shook her. Could Her Majesty simply forgive Applejack for all she'd done? In Ponyville, the myriad rebellions had all been demonized, both by heralds and by townsfolk themselves. Even ponies that moved to the one small town told stories of the rebellion making life difficult abroad. Queen Nyx must be absolutely livid at all of them. But the one Applejack was the largest, the most organized, and most active. Even if she could find it in her heart to forgive the rebel, Her Majesty would be facing throngs of citizens demanding Applejack's head. This, in Rarity's mind, led to only two possible conclusions. Forget Applejack, go home and wait, or find Applejack, hear her out, and find why she led this full crusade, and possibly join her. She bit her lip. No, there was only one option, only one possible outcome. She could never simply let a friend face the gallows. Not again. Not while she still drew breath.
But how to find Applejack and convince her of my sincerity? Take it!
What? Verity looked at her head and watched in utter confusion as a pink blur shot past her. The guard who had been tagged, similarly confused, wondering what the protocol was for being challenged to a game of tag. A blessed guard nearby widened his eyes and froze, seeming as though he was in the throes of PTSD-driven episode. When the pink pony burst into the palace, the former guard reacted immediately. Halt! He rushed after Pinkie, followed by all the guards, not currently whimpering to themselves. Rarity was utterly dumbstruck, and slowly stepped from her bench, only to be bowled over by an orange blur, rushing to the entrance herself. The White Unicorn hesitated a moment, then smirked and followed her friend. To hell with second-guessing. It's time to do something brass and immediate. Applejack! The fashionista called out. The wake of confusion and chaos had done its job in pulling the guard after her. There was no time to stop or waste. That didn't exclude the possibility of striking the white unicorn a dirty look.
What? Again, you came to try to talk some sense to me?
Rarity snorted as he matched her old friend's pace as much as she could. She had to duck a bit as Rainbow Dash flew over to tackle a lingering soldier to the ground. The guard was dazed, but still conscious. Though, that didn't last for long when Rainbow Dash used his chin as a springboard to launch herself into the air again. These massive hallways left a lot of room for her to maneuver in. She was going to use that to her advantage as much as possible.
Well, I have been quite a fool in the past 3 years. I did some thinking.
She paused and leaped over her guard, who was on the ground, groaning. He looked very dizzy for some odd reason. Verity's mind just assumed Pinky was involved.
And I am very sorry about my behavior. I am ready for this.
They finally halted at the massive doors to the throne room, which was surrounded by guards, completely unimpressed by the party pony's playful efforts. The aforementioned was giving apologetic, nervous smiles to a few unicorns who had spears pointed at her. The rest had gathered, who numbered in range from somewhere over 20, cast baleful glares to the two new arrivals.
Is it a bad time? I was hoping for a more peaceful solution.
The guards were unwilling to play along with the diplomacy, as they were with the crazy antics, and advanced mentally on the two grounded ponies. Rainbow Dash swooped at him, but had to pull back up as the spears were pointed upwards, almost impaling the Pegasus with her own momentum. She landed beside her friends and grit her teeth.
So, AJ,
what now? Lisa Rander. She calmly stated, sitting onto her haunches slowly. Rainbow Dash and Rarity both gave her a completely incredulous look. The Earth Pony turned her head toward them and winked her right eye. Her two friends nodded and sat. Dash had an idea about what was to happen, but Rarity simply had enough of doubting her friends and decided to trust Applejack. That was when the rumbling started. The unicorn guards, not sure what to make of it, faltered a bit. When they saw what was coming up behind their supposed prisoners, a few visibly paled. A small army of critters were surging down the hallway, a fuzzy horde of doom, vengeance, and quite possibly more doom. Leading them was a Pegasus clinging on to dear life on the back of a roughly house-sized wolf-like creature. The guards tried to hold her ground, but Dash grabbed her two friends and sipped up to the ceiling, where they found themselves simply run over by the tide of not-so-small woodland creatures. Rarity gaped in absolute disbelief.
Is that Lupus Meta? How is she?
it's Fluttershy!
Came both voices of Rainbow Dash and Applejack. The Pegasus strained to keep aloft with the two. The rest of the animals somehow battered down the doors to the throne room, a surprised shriek and a curse coming out from the interior.
What in the name of all my night is this?
Queen Nyx was angry and confused. Mostly confused. It wasn't, after all, every day when a stampede of animals came charging into one's throne room. There had been an attack on the palace, and her lieutenants were already on their way, no doubt. Perfect Cut, Spitfire, and Wellheart couldn't get there in time, but Fletcher and Spike were in the palace, ready to go. Audacia was not an option in the first place. In fact, why weren't they here yet? No matter. She could handle these intruders herself. She lifted her mother with her mane and stepped from the throne, scowling. Twilight was deposited on the throne, where it was relatively safe, and the alicorn stood in front of it, protectively. When the animals cleared out, she smirked on the group.
Ah, good of you to come, Applejack. You spared me the trouble of continuing to hunt you down. Surrender.
She noticed the bandages over the pale yellow Pegasus' eyes, frowning. She would have a talk with Perfect Cut later.
Not your life,
Your Majesty, Applejack mocked. Her green eyes narrowed. Rarity and Rainbow Dash stood to either side of her, and Fluttershy hurried up to them, slightly out of breath.
I'm here for you now. We're gonna finish the job we started 6 years ago. I ain't gonna let you kill all them little innocent ponies.
Rarity gave a shocked look to Applejack, then back at the Dark Queen.
What is she talking about, Your Majesty?
Nyx scoffed, shrugging her wings. Her eyes never left Applejack's. The two locked in a contest of will already. She would not be the one who backed down.
I do not know what lies he has filled your head with.
The unicorn spoke sternly, letting just a hint of threat carry into her voice. But if the three of you, she directed to Fluttershy, Rainbow Dash, and Rarity,
will leave this rebel to her fate, I will forgive you for your intrusion and spare your lives.
Rarity hesitated. It was not her life she feared for, but Fluttershy's, Dash's, and Pinky's. Where was she, anyway? Her hesitation vanished, however, as the question still came to mind about what Applejack had said. She must know.
Nyx!
The unicorn stamped a hoof.
I asked a question!
The Dark Queen seemed taken back, surprised by more the audacity of the man than the outburst herself. She broke eye contact with the farm mare, and shot Rarity a withering glare, before it became a smile.
Now, Diamond Rarity, do you really think I would murder my own subjects for any reason? If they were suspected of treason, they of course would be tried fairly. Whatever accusation or Applejack has leveled at me is false.
It is only the deranged rantings of a no-terror.
She was cut off by a loud BAMF of a teleportation spell. There was a blue mare with a silver mane. She looked familiar, but Nyx couldn't place it.
Here, everyone!
She had the elements with her. The Dark Queen started and prepared to step forward.
Stop!
Another BAMF came to the attention of the guard's car, and all of them stared at the lavender-coated pony, which suddenly interjected herself between the alicorn and the other elements. Pinky was at her side, giving her a very, very uncertain look.
What are you doing?
Twilight angrily shouted, glaring at her. No, the other Twilight's friends, and Rainbow Dash.
What is wrong with you? Why are you doing this?
She stamped a hoof, eyes burning red.
I won't let anybody do anything stupid. Let's just all calm down and talk about this.
I'm really, really sorry, Twilight.
Pinky, where?
Nyx gasped as the hoof fell onto the purple unicorn's head, knocking her silly to the ground. The distraction had been enough for the elements to power up, and Nyx recoiled in fear, and Pinky rushed to the side of the other 5 bearers to add herself to the union. The Dark Queen could sense the rolling energy, but it wasn't like last time. There didn't seem to be a weak link to it. Even that Trixie, that was her name, was experiencing the full power of the elements. With a dry mouth, she could only watch in terror. She tried to move, found she could not. Some force holding her there, keeping her in place for the magic to do its work. Twilight groaned and looked up groggily. She saw what was happening, and simply bowed her head. She tried, but simply couldn't stop it now. The power of manifested. The rainbow led from the now levitating ponies was far larger than last time. But there was something wrong about it. It roiled and shook, turbulent energy causing tremors in the castle. Plaster dust fell from the ceiling, and just as the mightiest of spells was about to strike at Queen Nyx, it exploded violently. 6 ponies were flung to the different corners of the room, severely weakened and dazed from whatever catalyst had wrought their defeat. Twilight was sent flying away as well, but she was caught quickly by the Dark Queen's magic. She herself was forced back onto her haunches, the wind knocked out of her. For a moment, the room seemed it would shake itself apart, but it held, and thus Nightmare Moon had triumphed over the elements again. Applejack regained her senses for a moment, trying to struggle to her heels. But a racking pain surged through her, the backlash of a corrupted spell. As she fell into the grip of unconsciousness, she heard the laughing of the Dark Queen, and knew they had lost. A loud clattering of metal on metal woke the 6. They laid on closed stone, which was covered with dirt and grime. Haystacks had been set in the room, meant as temporary bedding, but they had simply been dragged into the cells with no one to care for their own comfort. To keep them from making an organized effort at escape, each had their own cell, save for Applejack and Trixie, who had been put in the same one. Each could see into the cell opposite them only. Applejack and Trixie could only see into a cell containing the skeleton of a prisoner long since dead. Rarity could only behold a terrifying, shaking Fluttershy, and Rainbow Dash found herself looking toward Pinky, who had lost any ounce of her determination for some reason. Once they took off enough of the cobwebs in their heads to be fully aware of their surroundings, they looked toward the sharp of a noise. There stood Perfect Cut, grinning wildly. A tray lay on the ground, probably what caused the noise.
Lanky, lanky. Look what we have here. Press prisoners. Lucky you. I'm not about to play with you.
She pouted at that, ignoring the dirty look shot at her by the earth ponies she would be facing. She began to pace back and forth slowly, menacingly in the walkway between cells.
Unluckily for you, you're all scheduled for execution, so I'll be killing you anyway, just not the fun way.
She flicked her lips at Fluttershy, who curled up tighter. Perfect! You're a nag! Don't lie! There came a familiar voice, as a purple dragon stepped into view of Rarity's cell. Spike. Spike had disappeared in the years after Twilight's death, and when he come back, he was larger, much larger. He had aged beyond what 6 years should have allowed, and while he wasn't an adult yet, his size allowed him to stand at the same size as Queen Nyx. The only ones of you that are slated for death are Applejack and Trixie. Sorry, girls. His tone showed he really meant it, but he wasn't going to intervene. He walked down in front of Applejack's cell, on the way to Dash's. You just gonna let old friends Dash back? Some friend you are, huh? The farm mayor practically spat at him through the bars. The dragon shrugged. I got more important things to worry about. He stopped in front of the cyan Pegasus and folded his arms. Dash couldn't believe her eyes. Armor, sword, shield. He really did look like a regular knight now. You, specifically. In Twilight. You both have to go home. We'll be sending you off before your execution. Sure. That'd be cool. Sir Him! You're just gonna leave us like this? Applejack wrapped her forelegs around the bars of her cell and shook them as much as she could. Still far too weak to do much anything to them, though, except for pressing her head against him and glaring to her right, as if that would send her death glare straight to Dash. I've already told you, I want to go home. I don't want anything to do with this world, anything to do with you. I was only helped because you promised me I'd go home afterwards. Well, too bad. Someone else is going to do that without making demands. Rainbow Dash did much the same as Applejack, glaring from the side from the left. Please, Rainbow Dash, Trixie pleaded. We need your help. Our very society is dying. Not my problem. Spike cleared his throat. Yeah, kind of a jerk move there, AJ. Pulling other ponies into your problems? Not cool. He motioned for Perfect Cut to leave. Come on, you. I don't want you down here alone with them. The pink Pegasus pouted, stuck out her bottom lip.
What? You don't trust me?
No. Dragon bluntly stated. I don't. Now get out. The Pegasus scowled and stormed out, likely to cause trouble elsewhere. As soon as he was gone, Spike so much spoke without was looking at the mayor he was talking to. AJ, I'm sorry, but you got yourself into this mess. You got no one to blame but yourself. Your execution is tomorrow, at the same time as Trixie. I'm not sorry about seeing her go. He started, walking towards the dozen exit. The rest of you are going to be put on trial for high treason. Twilight's going to plead your cases, so you better be thankful she's nice enough to bother. The door opened, then slammed shut. The 6 ponies were left to each other's company. None of them had anything to say.